After 20 years, her billionaire husband wanted someone younger, but what she said left him speech. Broken heart. After 20 years, her billionaire husband wanted someone younger, but what she said left him speechless. Broken heart. Before we dive into today's emotional story, make sure to subscribe for more heart-touching tales that remind us what real love, pain, and courage look like. Bell. The ballroom lights glowed like liquid gold that night. Everyone was laughing, drinking, celebrating the success of the Kingsley Foundation's 20-year anniversary gala, except the woman who built it. Naomi Kingsley, elegant and composed, stood by the marble pillar, her smile fixed like porcelain. Her ebony skin shimmered beneath the chandelier, but her heart pulsed with quiet ache. She'd just turned 51. Her husband, Richard Kingsley, was 56, and the whispers said he'd been seen with a 28-year-old art consultant in Los Angeles. When the rumor first reached her, Naomi laughed. Richard? The man who couldn't even order dinner without asking me to double-check the sauce. But then came the missed calls. The secretive texts. The sudden business trips that ran longer than expected. Now, as he stood across the room with that charming billionaire smile, she could read the truth in his eyes. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking through her. 20 years earlier, Naomi had been a small-town nurse from Atlanta who fell in love with a man who promised the world, and somehow kept that promise. Together they built a life of penthouses, private jets, and foundation galas that funded hospitals across the country. People called them the perfect couple. But perfection, Naomi learned, is often just silence polished with diamonds. That morning before the gala, she'd found something odd on Richard's desk, a perfume receipt from Beverly Hills. The fragrance was Amber Muse, a scent Naomi hadn't worn in over a decade. She held the receipt in her hand and whispered, "Someone younger must smell divine." Her reflection in the window smiled back sadly. Richard came up behind her that evening, champagne in hand. "You've outdone yourself again, Naomi. The event's a hit." She turned slowly, every movement deliberate. "I've had 20 years of practice making things look perfect." He blinked, a flash of guilt in his sea-blue eyes. "Naomi, what's that supposed to mean?" "It means I know." The music, the laughter, none of it mattered in that moment. Richard's hand stiffened around the glass. "Know what? That Amber Muse doesn't suit me anymore." He froze. The name of the perfume was all she needed to say. That night, Naomi didn't cry. She sat by the window of their Manhattan penthouse, city lights flickering like tiny confessions. 20 years of loyalty, of love, of building an empire together, and he'd thrown it away for youth. She whispered to herself, "If he wants someone younger, then let him also want someone weaker. Because I'm not that woman anymore." The next morning, Naomi made a quiet decision. She wasn't going to beg, argue, or chase. She was going to teach him what he lost, with grace, silence, and the kind of power no money could buy. If you discovered your partner of 20 years was falling for someone younger, would you confront them, or walk away with dignity like Naomi? Speech balloons, share your thoughts in the comments below. When silence becomes power and grace becomes her greatest weapon. 2 weeks had passed since the gala. 2 weeks of careful, intentional silence. Naomi hadn't shouted, cursed, or thrown anything. That would have given Richard an excuse, a way to label her emotional, irrational, or dramatic. Instead, she became calm, dangerously calm. She went about her routine with precision, saying little, but seeing everything. Richard noticed. He noticed that she no longer waited up for him at night. He noticed her perfume changed, velvet smoke, not his favorite scent. He noticed that her laughter had returned, but it wasn't for him anymore. It was a Friday morning when Richard walked into the kitchen and found Naomi having breakfast alone. The penthouse smelled of roasted coffee and citrus, sunlight pouring across the white marble like liquid silk. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," she replied without looking up. She was reading the financial section, her tone neutral, almost indifferent. He tried again. "You've been quiet lately." She folded the paper neatly. "I've been busy lately." "With what?" She met his gaze. "With remembering who I was before I became Mrs. Kingsley." That made him blink. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I forgot what I loved, what I wanted, who I used to be. So I'm fixing that." She took a sip of coffee. "Don't worry, I won't make a scene. That's not my style. Richard stood there, unsure whether to be defensive or relieved. Naomi, come on. You're overthinking. There's nothing going on between me and... Please don't finish that sentence. Her eyes were sharp but steady. Because the moment you lie to me again, I'll lose every ounce of respect I have left for you. And believe me, that's far worse than losing my love. The quiet in the room was suffocating. She rose from the table, her silk robe whispering against the floor. You should eat before your meeting, she said, and left the room. 2 days later, Naomi hosted a charity dinner at the Rosewood Hotel, the same event she and Richard used to organize together every spring. But this time, she planned it without him. When she arrived, every head turned. Her dress was black velvet, her curls styled perfectly, her confidence magnetic. Even Richard, standing at the far end of the ballroom beside a young blonde woman, froze when he saw her. Naomi walked straight toward them, her heels echoing like small thunder across the marble floor. Good evening, she said, offering the young woman a warm but measured smile. I don't believe we've met. The woman smiled nervously. Oh, I'm Claire. I work with Mr. Kingsley on art investments, Naomi finished for her, eyes flicking briefly to Richard. Yes, I've heard. Richard's jaw tightened. Naomi, this isn't the time. Relax, Richard, she said softly. It's just conversation. The other guests around them sensed tension, but Naomi's grace kept them guessing. She turned to Claire and said, You're very beautiful. I can see why my husband's business interests have expanded. Claire's eyes widened slightly, unsure whether to smile or apologize. Richard coughed, looking mortified. Naomi continued, Enjoy the evening, both of you. The wine's exquisite. Just like old promises. And with that, she walked away, calm, poised, untouchable. Halfway through the dinner, the host called Naomi to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, please welcome our guest of honor and founder of the Kingsley Foundation, Mrs. Naomi Kingsley. The applause was thunderous. Even Richard clapped, though his chest was tight with dread. Naomi stepped up to the microphone, the spotlight soft against her brown skin. She smiled at the crowd, but her eyes found Richard's instantly. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began. For 20 years, I've stood beside a man I admired deeply. Together, we built hospitals, scholarships, and opportunities for people who believed they'd been forgotten. Not out of anger, but peace. Because closure, she realized, isn't something someone gives you. It's something you decide. Speech balloon. If someone broke your heart after years together, would you take them back if they finally changed? Or would you walk away forever like Naomi did? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Someone might need your perspective today. Red Har. Winter came early that year. The city was wrapped in frost, and Richard Kingsley's penthouse, once alive with music, laughter, and Naomi's warmth, now felt like a museum of memories. He still kept her favorite teacups, untouched. The piano gathered dust. And every corner of that vast apartment whispered her absence. He'd been pretending to move on, attending events, dating women half his age, pretending he was still the man everyone envied. But every night, when the lights dimmed and the laughter faded, guilt crept in like a slow, heavy fog. He would scroll through old photos, Naomi in her paint-splattered apron, her smile wide, her eyes full of trust. He'd stare at those pictures for hours, whispering, "What did I do?" For the first time in decades, Richard wasn't powerful. He was just alone. It was a Sunday morning when it happened. Richard was invited to an exclusive business conference at a luxury hotel downtown, the kind of event where billionaires gathered to brag about their next big project. But as he took his seat at the back of the ballroom, the next speaker walked on stage. It was Naomi. The crowd erupted in applause. She wore a crisp white suit, her hair swept into an elegant bun, her confidence commanding the room. Behind her was a banner that read, "The Naomi Kingsley Foundation, building futures, not walls." Richard froze. As Naomi spoke, her voice carried warmth and conviction. She talked about resilience, about women rediscovering their worth after being broken down. She didn't mention Richard's name, not once, yet every word felt like it was aimed straight at him. There's a special kind of pain that comes when you give your best years to someone who forgets what they prayed for once they have it. But there's also a special kind of peace that comes when you forgive them, not for their sake, but for your own freedom. The audience stood, applauding thunderously. Richard couldn't clap. He just sat there, small, invisible, tears welling in his eyes. When Naomi walked off the stage, their eyes met briefly. No anger. No hate. Just quiet knowing. That look said everything. You taught me who I was, and I'll never forget, but I'll never go back. Fate, however, had its own way of humbling even the proudest. One late night, driving home through rain-slick streets, Richard's car skidded on a turn and crashed into a barrier. The next thing he remembered was waking up in a hospital bed, his ribs aching, his right arm in a cast. No reporters. No friends. No woman waiting by his bedside. Only the quiet beeping of machines. For 2 days, no one visited. Then on the third day, the door opened. Naomi. She stood there with a bouquet of lilies, her favorite, not his. Richard blinked, stunned. You came. Naomi smiled faintly. I heard what happened. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. He swallowed hard. You didn't have to. I know, she said softly. But I wanted to. She placed the flowers in a vase by the window, then sat down. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't cold this time, it was full of things left unsaid. Finally, Richard whispered, I don't deserve your kindness. Naomi looked at him, eyes gentle. Maybe not. But forgiveness isn't about deserving, Richard. It's about letting go. He blinked back tears. Naomi. I've lost everything. The company's struggling, the board's turning on me, and I can't even look in the mirror without seeing what I became. Naomi nodded slowly. Then maybe this is where you start over. He gave a small broken laugh. At my age. She smiled softly. Redemption doesn't care about age. And for the first time in a long while, Richard didn't feel judged, just seen. A few weeks after his discharge, Richard received a handwritten invitation. Charity Gala, in honor of women rebuilding their lives after betrayal. Hosted by the Naomi Kingsley Foundation. At first, he hesitated. Then, he decided to go. When he arrived, Naomi was radiant as ever, surrounded by supporters and success stories. But what caught Richard's attention wasn't her fame, it was her peace. She didn't need him anymore. And strangely, that realization didn't crush him, it freed him. Later that night, as guests mingled, Naomi approached him. Richard. You came. He nodded, smiling. I wouldn't miss it. She poured him a glass of wine. So how's life treating you? He chuckled. Humbling me. Every single day. Naomi smiled knowingly. Good. Humility builds character. They both laughed. Then, after a pause, Richard said, You know, Naomi, I thought I'd never be happy again after losing you. But seeing you like this, maybe happiness doesn't always mean having what you want. Sometimes it's knowing the one you hurt finally found peace. Her eyes softened. And maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past, it's about being grateful it's over. They clinked glasses gently. It wasn't reconciliation. It was closure. Months passed. Naomi's foundation expanded globally. She became an icon, not because she was once a billionaire's wife, but because she was a woman who rebuilt herself from ashes. During a business trip to Atlanta, Naomi met someone new, Ethan Reynolds, a quiet architect who admired her strength before he even knew her story. He wasn't wealthy. He wasn't flashy. But he listened. He cared. He made her laugh again. For the first time in 20 years, Naomi felt safe. When Richard learned she was seeing someone, he didn't call, didn't interfere. He just whispered to himself, She deserves every bit of happiness I couldn't give. 6 months later, Naomi received a letter in the mail. It was from Richard. His handwriting was shaky. Naomi. I've been doing a lot of thinking. You were right, I didn't lose you because you stopped loving me. I lost you because I stopped valuing you. Thank you for loving me when I didn't deserve it. Thank you for showing me what strength looks like. I'll spend the rest of my days trying to be the kind of man who deserved you. Even if it's too late. Richard. Naomi folded the letter carefully, tears glistening in her eyes. Then she whispered, Goodbye, Richard. And for the first time, it truly felt like goodbye, not out of pain but peace. Speech balloon. If you were Naomi, would you have visited him at the hospital? Would you have forgiven him after years of betrayal, or would you have walked away forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story could help someone find their own closure. Red Har. A year had passed since the day Naomi received Richard's final letter. The sun rose gently over the city that had once witnessed her heartbreak, but now it felt like her city again. She walked through the bustling streets with a calm confidence, her life filled with meaning and serenity. The Naomi Kingsley Foundation had become one of the most respected non-profits in the country. They built shelters, sponsored education for women starting over, and even created business grants for single mothers. Every corner of her office buzzed with energy and hope. She was no longer Richard Kingsley's wife. She was Naomi Kingsley, founder, leader, survivor, and light. Sometimes, she still looked at old photos, not with sadness, but gratitude. Because those memories were no longer wounds, they were proof of growth. One autumn afternoon, Naomi decided to visit the mansion she once shared with Richard. It had been listed for sale for months, but she hadn't returned since the day she walked out. The air smelled the same, faintly of cedar and roses. The marble floors gleamed. The chandeliers still sparkled, but the house was empty now, stripped of everything personal. She walked through the halls, trailing her fingers along the walls, remembering the woman who used to live there, the one who cooked elaborate dinners for a husband who always came home late, who smiled through loneliness, who waited to be seen. And then she whispered to herself, "She deserved better. And I finally gave it to her." She closed the door behind her, not in anger, but with finality. That chapter was done. A few weeks later, Naomi and Ethan were at a cafe near the waterfront. It was Saturday, her favorite day, the kind that smelled of cinnamon and possibility. As they laughed over coffee, a familiar figure appeared across the street. Richard. He looked older, thinner, but there was something gentler in his eyes now, a man who had made peace with his past. When he noticed Naomi, he didn't approach. He simply smiled, a small, sincere smile, and tipped his hat. Naomi smiled back, her heart light. Ethan noticed. "Friend of yours." She hesitated, then said softly, "Someone I once loved, and forgave." And with that, she turned back to Ethan, where the sunlight caught her smile, the smile of a woman finally free. 6 months later, Naomi was honored at the National Women of Strength Awards in Washington, D.C. The room stood still as she walked up to the stage, dressed in a flowing navy gown. The audience, business leaders, activists, artists, rose to their feet, clapping thunderously. As she took the microphone, she paused for a moment, her voice trembling slightly. "I once thought my life ended when someone I loved chose someone else. But what I didn't know then was that heartbreak doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. It shows you who you are when everything you depended on disappears. And that version of you, the one who gets back up, she's the real miracle." The crowd erupted in applause. Tears filled eyes across the room. Naomi smiled and added, "So to anyone listening tonight who thinks they've lost everything, you haven't. You've just been given a chance to rebuild." It was more than a speech. It was closure. 2 weeks later, Naomi received a message that Richard had passed away quietly in his sleep. There was no drama, no tragedy, just peace. He had left a note with his lawyer. "To Naomi, I'm proud of you. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like, the kind that lets go." At his funeral, Naomi stood among a small group of people, dressed simply in black. She laid a single white lily on his coffin, the same flowers she'd once brought to his hospital room. She didn't cry. She simply whispered, "Rest now." Because she knew, some love stories aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to teach forever. Months later, Naomi and Ethan traveled to a quiet coastal town to celebrate the opening of a new women's center. As the ribbon was cut, the crowd cheered, and Naomi's heart swelled with gratitude. That night, as they sat by the ocean, Ethan took her hand. "You've built something beautiful," he said. Naomi smiled. "No, we've built something meaningful." The stars shimmered above them. The waves crashed softly. Ethan leaned closer. "Do you ever think about the past?" "Sometimes," Naomi admitted. "But not with regret. The past made me strong enough to love right this time." And with that he kissed her forehead, not as a man claiming possession, but as one honoring peace. For the first time in 20 years, Naomi wasn't surviving. She was living. Years later, Naomi's foundation bore her name on schools, shelters, and hospitals across the country. She had turned her pain into purpose, her heartbreak into hope. Every woman who walked through those doors carried her story, of betrayal, loss, and triumph. And on the wall of her office hung a framed quote she wrote herself. "The woman I became thanks the man who broke me, because without him, I'd never have found her." That was her truth. Her freedom. Her victory. Speech balloon. Do you believe people can truly change after realizing the pain they've caused? Would you forgive them like Naomi, or move on to build your peace elsewhere? Share your thoughts in the comments. Someone watching might find their healing through your words. Red heart. Naomi didn't win by revenge. She won by rising. Because in the end, grace always speaks louder than betrayal.